Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my 2022 TBR. This is ambitious, but these are all books that I want to sort of highlight for myself for various reasons. So there are quite a few books here, so without further ado, let's just hop into it. So the first stack I have here are the nonfiction books that I would really like to prioritize this year. Starting with these three little BBs. These are very doable, I feel like. So the first book I have here is The Gothic, A Very Short Introduction by Nick Groom. This is what it says on the tin. It's a short refresher on like Gothic literature. Given my interest in horror literature, in Shirley Jackson, I'm planning on reading some of Shirley Jackson's works. I have been trying to prioritize reading women in horror. A lot of the things that I touched on last year, they just happen to have Gothic elements, so I feel like this should have been a text that I read last year, but it might just be fun to like put a neat little bow on everything that I read last year that had Gothic elements. Then I have Fairy Tales, A Very Short Introduction by Marina Warner. Again, I have an interest in folk and fairy stories as somebody who has an academic background in children's lit. Maybe one day I'll get to go back and I'll continue within that niche. In 2021, I read a lot of folk and fairy stories, and I feel like, again, to solidify my learning, I might want to put this in my brain. And the last one I have here is sort of prep work for the next book that I'm going to talk about, and that is Children's Literature, A Very Short Introduction by Kimberly Reynolds. Like I said, I have a academic past in children's lit, and I would like to refresh myself with this, and then also, not on the TBR, but something that I do want to get to is A History of Children's Books in 100 Books by Roderick Cave and Sarah Ayad. The reason that I'm interested in children's literature is because I would like to make Dear Genius, The Letters of Ethel Nordstrom, and Good Books for Bad Children happen. I would like to focus on this badass lesbian who shaped children's publishing as we know it. These are all books that I would like to read to sort of inspire and like invigorate that little video that I've been thinking about making for a while. It needs to happen. The last book I have here that is nonfiction is Shirley Jackson, A Rather Haunted Life by Ruth Franklin. So this is a biography and looking at the author's life. Now, generally I don't do biographical readings of texts. Feel pretty strongly that a biography of an author doesn't matter, but I do find Shirley Jackson interesting as a human. I want to learn more about her. I have quite a few of her books on my various TBRs for this year, and if I get through enough of them, I would like to pick this up. This is like the last step because I am a little bit worried that because this is looking at her biography and she's publishing as she's living, obviously, I worry that it might spoil some of her books, and I don't want that. I want to experience them first. So if I get through the Shirley Jackson books that are on my TBR this year, I will then pick up the biography. Let's do children's lit because it's a small, quick category. So I have 3 books that fall into children's lit on my TBR for this year. One of them is The Missing of Claire de Lune by Christelle Dabos. This is a piece of translated fiction. It's a piece of young adult fiction. It is fantasy, and I remember really liking the first book, A Winter's Promise. It had like Miyazaki vibes, but I would really like to get to this and perhaps the third book in 2022, just because I remember enjoying it so much, and we need to fit in some joy always. The plot of the first book is that we have a political marriage happening. Our protagonist marries this, like, I almost want to say he's like Victor Crumb before we get to know that Victor Crumb is kind of a nice guy. He's just that like grumpy persona of Victor Crumb all the time, and so she's in this arranged marriage and hating it, and there's like a culture shock for her moving from one island to another. The next book I have here is Hunting by Stars by Sherry de Moline. This is the second book in I don't even know if it's a series, but it's following on from The Marrow Thieves by Sherry DeMolene, a book in which it's a dystopian now in which Indigenous folks are being harvested for their bone marrow after white folks stop being able to dream. This is a follow-up story, and I really enjoyed the first book, so I would like to see what is happening in this universe. The final book I have here, I have heard only good things from everybody on BookTube, and it is middle grade. I don't often go for middle grade, which is maybe my bad. Like, maybe I need to explore more middle grade. The book that I have here is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Austen. I don't know anything about this book. I picked it up because so many of my favorite creators that I have been watching this past year keep bringing it up as a favorite. Why not get into some delightful middle grade that everybody loves? I would like to put one Jane Austen novel on my TBR. I don't know which one yet, so I have obviously read the two big ones, Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. I read both of those in university. Like Shirley Jackson, Jane Austen is a woman with 6 novels. Very, very doable to complete their entire body of works. As somebody pointed out, Jane Austen will stop being relevant when literature no longer has women's fiction. Literature no longer has almost exclusively white men on prizes. Like, Jane Austen is still very relevant. Scholarship is also super into her. When I was doing my master's, so many people were like, Jane Austen's the hot thing right now, even though she's been dead for forever and a half. I would like to get in on this hype, and so I actually have copies of everything I've collected used over the years for the most part. Emma, Persuasion, Northanger Abbey, and Mansfield Park. I'm not sure which one I want to tackle yet. One of these I would like to happen this year. Let's do genre fiction. I have picked up some genre fiction over the years that's like hot and then never touched them. One of those is Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. I know literally nothing about this book. Meet Roger, skilled with words, languages come easily to him. He instinctively understands how the world works through the power of story. Meet Dodger, his twin. Numbers are her world, her obsession, her everything. All she understands she does through the power of math. Roger and Dodger, oh god, they rhyme. Roger and Dodger aren't exactly human, though they don't realize it. They aren't exactly gods either. Not entirely, not yet. I picked this up because I really enjoy the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire, and I thought I would try one of her other works, and this was like the hot title I was seeing across lots of book tables when I worked at Indigo. Let's put it on the list, let's do it. The other book I have here that it was like a hot title that I feel like I actually don't know if I'm gonna like based on some of the reviews I've heard now, but let's see for myself, right? This is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Again, I have really enjoyed V.E. Schwab's works that I have read. I've dabbled into her middle grade and her adult fantasy literature. This is another piece of adult fantasy literature that is everywhere on the internet. Now, I have heard some mixed reviews, which is why I have yet to reach for this. I'm hoping if I set it as a goal, if I put it on this list, that I try and prioritize this and try and assess for myself what I think about this text. Then there's a book that I'm ashamed to say I did not get to in 2021. I did make a video like this in 2021. So instead of doing all of the books, last year I did the 5 books at the top of my 2021 list. This year I'm just doing all the books, and this was actually in my top 5. I never got to it because it's intimidating. It's a shonker. And that is The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. This was like the hot text when I first joined BookTube. Everybody was reading this. I have yet to read it. So this is book 1 of the Gentleman Bastard sequence. The Thorn of Camor is said to be an unbeatable swordsman, a master thief, a ghost that walks through walls. Half the city believes him to be a legendary champion of the poor. The other half believe him to be a foolish myth. Nobody has it quite right. I will probably really enjoy this. I just have to get over the fact that it is so chunky, and it is the start of a series. Series are intimidating. Speaking of intimidating series, I have Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett. This is the 3rd book in the Discworld series, a 40+ book series that I am just getting into. Basically, when I started my YouTube channel, I read The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett and really enjoyed it, but that intimidation factor prevented me from picking up another book. Currently, I am reading The Light Fantastic by Terry Pratchett and really enjoying it. And I actually have the first, like, I've acquired at used bookstores the first 5 books in the Discworld series, so I have the 3rd book. Let's do it. Oh, should I tell you what this is about? It looks like this is about a wizard. The last thing the wizard Drumbillet did before death laid a bony hand on his shoulder was to pass on his staff of power to the 8th son of an 8th son. Unfortunately for his colleagues in the chauvinistic, not to say misogynistic world of magic, he failed to check that the baby in question was a son. Everybody knows that there's no such thing as a female wizard, but now it's gone and happened, and there's nothing much anyone can do about it. Let the battle of the sexes begin. The last genre fiction book I have here is Lilith's Brood by Octavia E. Butler. This contains the complete series Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. She was one of 2 women on a sci-fi course in my undergrad, and I love her works. Earlier this year, I read Kindred for the first time. Loved it. It's one of my favorite books of the year. I will link that video above as well if you want to see what other books I loved this year. And I just think it's time to read as much of her works as I can. Lilith's Brood is a profoundly evocative, sensual, and disturbing epic of human transformation. You know what? I'm gonna leave it there. I don't want to know more. So I have 4 piles here out of my general fiction TBR. The largest pile is just like random things that I really want to read. The other 3 piles are actually grouped books that I would like to do videos on. The first one is The Dark Library by Cyril Martinez, translated by Joseph Patrick Stansel. Dark Library, translated fiction, which I would like to read more of, and it's from one of my favorite small publishing presses in Toronto, Coach House Books. Generally, I try and go through their catalog once a year, once a season, and order something from them, and I ordered this 2 years ago. Now, at this point, this says, libraries are magical places, but what if they're even more magical than we know? In Cyril Martinez's library, the books are alive. Not just their ideas or their stories, but the books themselves. Yes, please. Then I have another piece of translated fiction, and that is The Nakano Thrift Shop by Hiromi Kawakami. I was sent a couple of years ago Strange Weather in Tokyo by a Japanese translated fiction subscription service, Osusumi Books. I don't know if they're still around. If they are, I will link them. I'm not sponsored. I'm not affiliated in any way. I just really enjoyed that they sent me a handwritten recommendation. It was a little expensive for me as a Canadian to get it shipped over, which is why I didn't subscribe. However, they did introduce me to Hiromi Kawakami and her strange, beautiful character story. I am hoping that this delivers similar vibes, similar love. Love is often found in unlikely places, but could there be anywhere less likely than the Nakano Thrift Shop? What stands out about Strange Weather in Tokyo is the sort of messy, quiet romance. And if there's romance here as well, I'm excited for that. Oh, I didn't mention the translator, Alison Markin Powell. This is the same translator as the other book that I read by Hiromi Kawakami as well, which is, I feel like, a win, because the translator is such a large part of the work that you're experiencing in another language, right? The next book I have here is Don't Look Now by Daphne du Maurier. I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier several falls ago now and really enjoyed it. I can't remember why this came up. If it came up on some books that you don't think are horror but are actually horrific by women list, or if I was just researching and I was like, oh, that sounds like it fits in with my sort of women in horror interest. But this is a slow-burning masterpiece of horror recounting a grieving couple's fateful visit to Venice. It sounds lovely and dreadful. I feel like this is a February read when everything is shit, or an October read when it's seasonally appropriate, you know? The next book I have here is How to Pronounce Knife by
Subankam Pramavangsa.
This came up in a literary magazine, I believe. I believe it's won a lot of prizes. There was last year a lot of hype around this book and I picked it up. This is looking at characters struggling to find their bearings in unfamiliar territory, illuminating their hopes, disappointments, love affairs, acts of defiance, and above all, their pursuit of a place to belong. The folks blurbing it all excite me. Like, one of them is Helen Oyeyemi, whose horror work I really enjoyed. Madeleine Tien is also on here. I enjoyed Madeline Tien's work, so I'm excited for this. Speaking of Helen Oyeyemi, I have Boy, Snow, Bird. So I found this used in a cute little bookshop that I happened to stumble across the one day. So like there was this older woman who is running it, and she's in a sort of rundown part of the city, and all of the used books are priced in a way to be inclusive of folks living in an area where the typical used bookstore would probably price people out of. Like, a lot of used bookstores are only a couple of dollars off cover price, whereas literally everything in this used bookstore was priced at a place where access to owning books becomes affordable. Just everything in the store was so well organized, like so well taken care of. They even have puzzles, and very adorably they mark on the box of puzzles whether it's a complete puzzle or not. Like, so she and her sister do the puzzle, and they will like let you know, like they'll cross off on the box where the piece is missing so you can determine if like that is a make it or break it for you. The care that went into this bookstore, like we just sort of poked our noses in for shits and giggles, and I was like, okay, I have to buy something because I've been in your space and I've looked around, so I need to say like thank you in some way for putting together such an amazing space. So I actually picked up 2 books from that used bookstore, and the first one was Boy, Snow, Bird. So we have, in the winter of 1953, Boy Novick arrives by chance in a small town in Massachusetts looking, she believes, for beauty, the opposite of life she's left behind in New York. She marries Arturo Whitman, a local widower, and becomes stepmother to his winsome daughter Snow. A wicked stepmother is a creature Boy never imagined she'd become. But elements of the familiar tale of aesthetic obsession begin to play themselves out when the birth of Boy's daughter, Bird, who is dark-skinned, exposes the Whitmans as light-skinned African Americans passing for white. This should be an interesting read. The other book that I picked up was Away by Jane Urquhart. So I have read 2 of Emily Urquhart's pieces of nonfiction, and she talks a lot about her parents in those pieces of nonfiction. So her father is a famous painter, Canadian. All of them are Canadian, and actually quite local to myself, like in the Niagara region. And so Emily Urquhart wrote Beyond the Pale. I really enjoyed both of her works, and I enjoyed sort of learning about her family and her parents. And in that, I learned that her mother, Jane Urquhart, is a quite famous Canadian novelist. And so to find Jane Urquhart used made me really excited. And so this is her 3rd novel. It's an engrossing, multi-generational tale shot through with passages of poetic intensity and beauty. The last in this random stack of general fiction is Lanny by Max Porter. So I actually sampled a chapter of this in a 5-star predictions reading vlog. I've heard a lot of folks that I trust as reviewers, as booktubers, rave about this book. My sampling of it had me very tempted, torn between picking up one versus the other. I ended up picking up probably the wrong book. Just the idea of like the folk, the forest, I'm excited. I feel like I'm hoping that checks a lot of boxes. The last 3 are like video projects that I would like to tackle. We have Sad Women, we have Shirley Jackson, and we have Normal People Vibes. So let's start with Normal People Vibes. So before the new Sally Rooney release came out, I really wanted to find something that had those Normal People vibes. I fell in love with Normal People. I wanted more with that similar vibe to it, and I picked up 2 books that were recommended. One of them is Fate and Furies by Lauren Groff. Every story has 2 sides, every relationship has 2 perspectives, and sometimes it turns out the key to a great marriage is not its truths, but its secrets. And it's described as devastatingly good. Enough betrayal, vengeance, and sex to read like one of the Greek tragedies. And so I think the reason that I'm seeing this having Normal People vibes is the 2 sides to every relationship aspect. Like, Normal People is very much about a miscommunication between 2 characters, and their failure to communicate results in this huge dissonance, this huge disconnect. And I'm hoping that that aspect of Marianne and Connell's relationship that I find really compelling, really interesting, is what I will get in Fates and Furies. The other book I have here is The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer. And so this says, the summer that Nixon reigns, 6 teenagers at a summer camp for the arts become inseparable. Decades later, that bond remains, but so much else has changed. Not everyone can sustain in adulthood what seemed so special in adolescence. It's again about a group of folks who had a really close relationship in their youth, struggling to connect, and so I'm hoping that it has that similar, again, the aspect that I find very compelling about Normal People is that the peopling aspect, the real world miscommunications, the messiness of relationships. So I'm hoping that this delivers that vibe that I really like about Sally Rooney. What I'm hoping to do at some point is to do a reading vlog pairing these two books together and thinking about them as books with Sally Rooney vibes because they came up on lists of books with Sally Rooney vibes. Do I agree? This is a Shirley Jackson stack. I want to read the rest of Shirley Jackson's works. So I have read 3 of her works. I have 3 of her works here, and I would like to read them in publication order. And then if you look at my 5 books to reread in 2022, I would like to wrap that neatly with a bow and reread one of my favorites by her, The Haunting of Hill House. So Through the Wall, The Bird's Nest, and I have The Sundial. Now, my approach to Shirley Jackson, I would like to know as little about these as possible, so I'm not going to share with you. I'm not going to read the back. I like to go into these and be surprised. At some point, I would like to read all of these and talk about all of these and talk about Shirley Jackson, maybe like spotlight her, because I will have, knock on wood, have read all 6 of her works, hopefully this year. Then the last stack of books we have here, I guess because I had picked up other books, bookstore algorithms gave me sad women who have experienced trauma. I don't even remember placing this book order. This is possibly a decision that I made when I accidentally forgot to take my medication and I was a space cadet for a day and couldn't figure out why I felt like shit. I have 3 books here, and I guess we can put them together and we can make a video about sad women. So I have Water Shall Refuse Them by Lucy McKnight Hardy. Following the accidental drowning of her sister, 16-year-old Nif and her family move to a small village on the Welsh borders to escape their grief. But rural seclusion doesn't bring any relief. As her family unravels, Nif begins to put together her own form of witchcraft, collecting talismans from the sun-bleached land. That is, until she meets Mally, a teen boy who takes a keen interest in her, and he has his own secret rites to divulge. Ah, I see why I picked this up. Reminiscent of the suspense of Shirley Jackson. Dangerous. I've been disappointed earlier this year when something promised Shirley Jackson vibes, but this genuinely does sound like Shirley Jackson vibes. So suspense of Shirley Jackson and soaked in the folk horror of British Isles, Water Shall Refuse Them is an atmospheric coming-of-age novel and a thrilling debut. I can see why I bought this. I don't remember buying it. Imagine my surprise when this package showed up in the mail and it's just like every single one of them is sad, sad women. But that actually sounds like I can see why I did that. The next book I have here is Girls Against God by Jenny Haval. Haval is a master of quiet horror and wonder. We also have realism blends with surrealism in this beautifully blunt, utterly unique novel. I don't know how Haval combines so many disparate elements, but it's a triumph. We also have thought-provoking and furiously original. This text is a subversive manifesto on the power of music, meaning-making, counterculture, and rebelling against the horrific banality of the everyday. Again, I think in that horrific banality of the everyday, I'm seeing Shirley Jackson vibes. Okay, before the battery dies, we have the 3rd book in this Sad Women haul. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. Deep underground, 39 women live imprisoned in a cage. Jesus Christ. Watched over by guards, these women have no memory of how they got there, no notion of time, and only vague recollections of their lives before. As the burn of electric light merges day into night, numberless years pass. A young girl, the 40th prisoner, sits alone and outcast in the corner. But soon she will show herself to be the key to the others' escape and survival in the strange world that awaits them above. Look forward to a sad women experiencing trauma reading vlog. I don't actually know how many books those are. Hold please. Just counted those. I have 30 books here. That's a nice round number, conveniently. Totally not planned, I just went through my shelves and grabbed things at random. Let me know your thoughts on any of these books in the comments down below. Is there anything here that you're like, oh wow, like I really think you should prioritize reading that, like I've read it and loved it. This is a totally doable number of books, just based on what I have historically read each year. Before we go, we have to thank my patrons who make videos like this possible. Patrons tip me and allow me the time to create videos that you can watch for free. There are some changes coming to Patreon in 2022 regarding the book clubs. I have a video on that. I will link it above and down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you are doing well, that you are staying safe, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye!